You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode 87. Today we're talking about parenting beyond punishment. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you are thriving, when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clarke-FIELDS, Mindfulness Mama Mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in their daily lives to take family and life to a new level of awakening. I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I'm the mom of two girls ages 7 and 10. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so happy to connect with you again through this podcast. It's been exciting to hear feedback from people who are enjoying the podcast. And in the name of feedback, I want to thank Raising Tegan, who gave a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you so much. And that's great. And she's saying gentle parenting is something she's been working on. The podcast is helping me so much by reminding me to fill myself first or my children won't take me seriously. Amen. So true. So thank you so much for being here and for supporting the podcast and for sharing it with friends. Someone shared it with Raising Tegan. Yay, that's the best way. Word of mouth. That's the best way to share things. This is going to be a great episode today. I am talking with Amy Bryant, who is an amazing human being, and you are just going to love her. And she is a psychologist and the force behind parenting beyond punishment and the play-at-home mom. So we're going to dive into a bunch of really cool topics, but we're going to be talking about, parenting in a more collaborative approach and without punishment, and also kind of what our own fears, how they drive us in our parenting journey. It's going to be really eye-opening, I think, for you, and we have a lot of fun too. So I think you'll really like this interview. As we speak, as this comes out live in 2017, or not live, recorded. Anyway, in 2017, we are right in the midst of our Mindful Parenting free 5-day training. And if you want to join us and you haven't joined us yet, you can probably catch the last 3 or 4 days of the training. If you want to join us go to mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. And we're going to be going over some really interesting topics. We're going to be having a little bit of a recorded training and then a live training every single day. We're going to learn about the parenting truth that every pediatrician gets wrong. And we're going to be having on our last day the hidden myth that undermines your parenting. And this is a really important one to talk about. So I'm excited about that. And then the Mindful Parenting course is going to be opening for registration. And registration is going to start opening on Friday, October 13th. And it's going to be closing on Friday, October 20th. So we have a registration window that's opening, and this is for the live course. And what's special about the live course is that it's kind of more than a course. It's like you join a membership program because you get to join the course for life and join in on the live calls every spring and every fall when we do the course. And people do that. It's really exciting to meet up with people every year and see how they're growing and what's going on. It's really exciting. But the reason Mindful Parenting is special and the reason it is different from other parenting trainings is that most other parenting trainings, they don't tell you that all that good communication stuff, it's really as good as nothing if you don't learn how to take care of your stress response. And that's what we work on in the first half of Mindful Parenting, is really understanding our own triggers and our own stories and helping to take care of our stress response so that we have that within. And then we have some of the best skillful communication tools that you can find anywhere in the second half of the course. So it's really a life changer, and I hope you'll join us. It's a powerful, powerful course. I've seen it transform people's lives in my community locally and online and around the world. It's exciting. So I hope you'll join us. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to learn more and to register. And I think that's about it. Let's get on to this interview with Amy Bryant. Today I'm talking to Amy Bryant, and Amy is a psychotherapist specializing in family relationships, parenting, and self-care for moms. She is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and online at Parenting Beyond Punishment. And Amy's just an all-around cool cat is kind of what I've discovered. So I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast today, Amy. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here and speaking with you, Hunter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And you have you have a lot of different things you do. But what your sort of presence in the online world is with Parenting Beyond Punishment and Play at Home Mom. And this is I kind of like to dive into the deep end here because the idea of parenting beyond punishment, the idea of no punishment is a little bit of a radical stance in this world of ours. And so I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, it is. It sounds people get really concerned that when we talk about parenting beyond punishment or parenting without using punishments, that our lives are kind of chaotic and they don't understand how that works. And people really tend to believe that children can't learn unless they're punished. So we talk a lot about helping parents remember that they learn to walk without being punished and talk without being punished and eat without being punished and all these wonderful things that they are able to learn. And they really learned it through modeling and through conversations and showing them and teaching them. And so when we talk about parenting beyond punishment, what we're really talking about is teaching our children step by step along the way instead of punishing them whenever they make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about a different way of viewing discipline. Traditionally, we've thought of discipline as punishment, but what we talk about a lot on Parenting Beyond Punishment is really taking the time to teach, taking the time to slow down and figure out what's going on with our children. Why is this happening? And getting really curious about that.
So cool. So it's looking at, so what I'm kind of getting from you is that traditionally, like we look at the behavior and we think they are doing something wrong. We look at it from like a behaviorist point of view, right? Like where they're
Sure,
doing
yes.
something wrong. So we have to, we have to make that feel uncomfortable and have to have some kind of punishment so they don't want to do that, right? This is the kind of thinking behind punishment, is that we want to make it so they don't want to do that thing. And this is like a complete, to look at it in a non-punitive way is a different paradigm. It's more like you're looking at what is going on with my child that this thing would happen. And maybe we should use an example because it's a little hard to talk about this sometimes.
I know, right? We could keep talking, but I agree. I think examples are really helpful.
Yeah. So say there's like a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, and they have a 2-year-old little brother, or little sister, and they get angry at the 2-year-old brother or sister, and they hit them, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
like hitting like that. Like we can't stand for hitting. Like obviously we don't want to be able. We don't want to stand for that. So let's use that as an example of how first off how you would look at that if in a way that's alternative to this sort of behaviorist. We have to make them feel have some sort of aversion to this behavior.
Right. How do we intervene? So the first thing when siblings hit, and they do, even children who don't have siblings hit, the first thing you do is you want to stop the behavior to protect them. So you might, protect the 2-year-old, and in that same time, you want to be really focusing on calming yourself down, because anytime someone hits your child, you're going to be worked up, and your instinct is going to be to be really forceful. And some parents might pop the 4 or 5-year-old. They might hit them, yelling, "Stop that right now!" But really, that really first step is to first intervene. So you're sort of blocking the hitting so the 2-year-old's not getting hitting. You're taking a deep breath and a slow exhale so that you're calming down. And then you're getting really curious, what's going on? So a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, a typically developing child at 4 or 5 can talk and express themselves and say what they want or need. But when they're dysregulated, when they're not calm or they're upset, they can't really access that higher thinking. So their 2-year-old sibling comes over, like any 2-year-old might do, and grabs the truck they're playing with and pulls it from their hands. And their immediate reaction is to hit the 2-year-old, right? And why? Why do they do this? They don't want their truck taken from them. So the intervention then is to, first stop the hitting, and then you say, you get really curious, you look around and you look at the truck in the 2-year-old's hand, and you might take a guess. So you might say something like, oh, I see John has your truck. Tell me what's going on. So you've brought your own emotional regulation, your own regulation into this field, and helped your 4 or 5-year-old calm down. So then your 4 or 5-year-old can begin to talk about what happened. They took my truck. I want it back, right? And then so you say, okay, so let's use some words. And then you give them the words. I never say, let's use words. I would say, okay, can you tell your sister, I want my truck, or that's my truck? And so you're really giving them the language so they have the skills. So in this incident, you might look at this scenario and say, this child is lacking the skills they need. They're lacking the regulation they need and the words they need to respond differently to this situation. They're not being bad. We don't want them to avoid playing with their sister. We just want them to do something besides hitting them.
So you're going in and coaching them, and because that's how we learn, is we make mistakes along the way, and then we say, what's a better way to do this? And this is how we learn. Absolutely.
And if we go in there yelling, and if we go in there hitting them, they're going to learn to yell and to hit. And that's not what we want them to teach them. And if we take the toy from the 4 or 5-year-old, or if we punish them, they're going to resent their sibling. And that's not what we want. We really want to nurture that sibling relationship.
So that's great. So you touched on a bunch of things. And one is that what they're learning from us kind of going in there and yelling at them is that yelling is a good idea. And that we can dominate we can dominate kids who are younger than us or smaller than us, because as adults, we're dominating this smaller being. And then, you're talking about that curiosity. And then I love how you're saying, like, focus on calming yourself down, because just as your child is dysregulated, they can't access their higher brain thinking. When we are dysregulated, when we are totally upset, we can't access that higher brain thinking either. It's we have to be able to take a step back and be able to kind of calm down that fight or flight in ourselves.
Absolutely.
And then showing them what, and so I love that. What about the idea of, parents coming in and being kind of the judge and jury? What do you think about that? Where they're like, they did this to me and blah, 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 and, make them do this. So what do you think about sort of those situations?
Well, again, there's sort of two goals. We want them to develop the skills to solve problems, and we also want to nurture relationships. So if we're coming in and we're being the judge and determining what happens, they're not learning how to resolve conflict in peaceful ways. And if we're coming down and deciding someone is right or wrong, again, we're not nurturing their relationship with each other, because when someone is constantly pointed out as wrong, there's almost always one child who's wrong more consistently than the other. Not just from a parent perspective. I'm not saying that that's true. Let me clarify. Then there's two things. We want to teach skills in that moment, and we want to nurture relationships. So we want to nurture the sibling relationship. We also want to nurture our relationship with our kids. So if we're judge and jury, they don't learn those skills, and then they hold a grudge. They resent our presence. They resent the sibling, and so it just really fails to do either of those long-term goals we have of life skills and problem solving, conflict resolution, and nurturing relationships.
Yeah, yeah. And then you always have to do it.
Right. And then you are repeatedly doing that for the rest of their lives in your home.
Yeah, you're roped into it. Well, it's interesting because my daughters, my oldest one, she's 10 and my youngest is 7. And for a little while, recently, my oldest daughter was getting frustrated with her younger daughter. And I think, I'm not sure, maybe there were times where I didn't have time for the coaching, or sometimes my oldest daughter is, she's very highly sensitive kid, and she finds it difficult to talk about things sometimes, like with her sister. It's just the nature of who she is, right? That it's uncomfortable to talk about some things. Like, she actually doesn't say, like, I love you very much, whereas the other one says it to me every day. She's just the nature of her. It's a little uncomfortable for her to talk about some things. So she actually got frustrated with me, saying, you never do anything. Like, she was like, she wanted me to come in and be judge and jury, because she was so, she felt like, in her rightness in that situation, like that.
Yes.
I would decide that she was right and her sister was wrong. And, and I think that probably, she's a real smart kid, and she can talk a real good talk, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, yes.
She talks her sister under the table, and her sister's like, I don't know what to do, so just hit you.
Right.
So
stop talking, right?
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I would kind of reflect back at her, like, oh, you're really frustrated, and that's part of what some of the skills I teach is, like, let's understand what's going on by some reflective listening and some kind of getting to things a little bit deeper. And it was interesting for me to be in the situation where she was like, she's basically saying to me, I want you to just go in and decide my sister is wrong, and why won't you ever do anything? Kind of thing.
Right. Come on, Mom. Side with me sometimes.
Yeah.
Just go in there and fix it. Well,
Yeah.
It is really hard, for children who are sensitive or children who are emotionally intense.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a really overwhelming situation. And I think sometimes it's holding that space for them, just being quiet, and saying, you know what, let's just sit here for a minute and breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I even sort of will take it on myself when I'm sort of navigating these things and say, you know what, I need to calm down. So let's just sit here all together and not say anything for just a minute. And so then everyone can kind of get to that more calm space, and then say, okay, starting with that, with just one child, I want to hear both of y'all speak. And so, just randomly choose, or you could ask, who wants to speak first? And then you sort of hold the space for that child to finish. Anything else? Is there anything else you want to say? And then you say, okay, I think I heard you. And like you said, the reflective listening, you repeat back what they said. Well, she took my truck, and I wanted to play with the truck over with the blocks, and so you sort of repeat that. And then you turn to the other child and you say, okay, I really want to hear your side. And then you kind of just hold the space. You don't have to come to a solution, but like you said, the 10-year-old is like, but I really want you to tell me I'm right. She just desperately wants to be right. And we can totally all understand that, of course. I always think I'm right.
Because I am.
Because I am. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it now, right?
Yeah.
But at 10, it's harder.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is good. I'm feeling reassured.
It sounds like you're already doing it and holding that space.
Well, that's the thing, is that holding the space is just that moment to pause, that moment to hold the space. I mean, that's just so huge, because that's what we want to skip. That's the uncomfortable place. That's
Oh
the
my gosh,
sitting in the
yes,
discomfort, right? And that's what we
yes,
just want to skip over, that part, and fix it.
yes.
That's like the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, well, it's, as parents, I think we can relate to that outside of that space, because when we get worked up, we're like, well, I'm just going to do the dishes. I'm going to pick up. I'm going to put the shoes away. I'm going to fold the blanket, right? We start tasking to try to calm ourselves down. And it's the same in that space with the siblings. It's so uncomfortable. We just want to solve it. Let me just be the judge and jury so we can move past this really uncomfortable place.
Mm, mhm, mhm. And part of the sort of, I think of parenting as the crucible, right, of learning, and
Mhm.
almost like bringing us towards a more enlightened place if we
Oh,
allow it and we intend it to
yes.
be. And part of that learning is to be able to sit in the discomfort, and to be
Yeah.
able to just sit there knowing that this is impermanent, this will not last forever, and we can going through it
Mhm.
actually allows it to dissipate, in paradoxically, faster than going around it or suppressing it. Yeah.
Yes, for so true. And this is, we might be learning these skills of sitting with the discomfort right along with our kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I know I certainly am. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So going back to the idea of kind of the traditional models of parenting, we've got kind of the authoritarian and we've got permissive. There's probably a lot more people who are raised with authoritarian parenting, and parenting with punishment. What do you see as what does in general? We talked about punishing, how it teaches them to maybe be sort of dominant over a younger child. But what does it teach us? What does it teach kids in the long run? And what does it create as far as in the family in the long run?
um, it, so punishing children, and having this sort of power over, um, creates a lot of tension, right? Children might be afraid a lot. They might get sneaky or lie so that they don't get in trouble. Um, they learn that mistakes have extremely bad consequences. And so it can be really hard to move forward in life, sort of fearlessly. Like, you know what, I'm going to
Mhm.
try this new job, or I'm going to try moving to this new city, or I'm going to try this new relationship. How does it interfere with what we want for them in the long term? It also interferes with our own relationship with them. So if we think about, this is where I usually start with parents, like, what are your long-term goals with your children? What do you want for them? And what do you want your relationship to be like with them when they're 20, um, and 25 and 30? And, you know, um, so,
Mhm. Mhm.
that power over approach, if we really want them to be able to speak up to their employers if something's going wrong, or to speak up, when they see something unjust,
Mhm.
or, do we always want them to be obedient? Or do we
Mhm.
want them to know when it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not going to obey this because it's not the right thing?
Mhm.
And we have plenty of examples through history when we wish people would have stood up and said no to an authority figure and said,
Mhm.
no, I'm not going to do this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those critical thinking skills are imperative. And it's really hard to develop critical thinking skills when you have to always do what you're told, when you're afraid to not do what you think is right,
Mm,
or you're
mhm. Yeah.
afraid to do what you do think is right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's funny, like my husband and I, because I started out with a more authority, and my child will be this, and she will listen to what I say. And as a
Hmm.
very sensitive, highly sensitive child, she taught me that didn't work. very
Right.
quickly. Yeah. And it was really interesting. But as we started to, as we made this shift, one of the big drivers for us was like I could see that my using power when she was young really created so much resentment. It created so much, it just killed our relationship. There was so much conflict. It was really frustrating. And it really was about this, like, I want to have a good relationship with my child when she's an adolescent, when she's a
Yes.
teenager. I don't want to be in, you know what, because my father and my parents were like, at one point my dad, like, they were taught me to be very free thinking, and then at one point they said, dad was all like, you should do what I say because I am the father and you are the child, and you should do what I say just because I say it. And I was like, well, that's BS.
Right.
And we had incredible conflict. We had
Yes.
incredible, I mean, I like ran away from home and stayed over at friends' houses at various nights, when I was a teenager. And it was just, it hurt our relationship for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to shift things for this generation. And I think that was one of the biggest things for us, was like seeing that the use of power, like, it's really interesting that power, because the power runs out. you know
Yes.
the power runs out. So while it may quote unquote work when they're younger, at some point they say, well, forget it, I'm just leaving. I'm calling
Yes.
my friend and saying, pick me up, or I don't,
Right.
that and so I thought that was a really interesting thing for me. It was like, oh, that it when the inverse relationship between power and influence. The more
Absolutely.
power you use, the less influence you have. The more influence, the more, the less power, the more influence you have.
Yes. Right. And that collaborative approach to working together, you're all on the same team.
Mhm.
Like, okay, this is a problem that we're having, let's figure out a way to solve this problem in a way that benefits all of us. Instead of my way or the highway, it's, I really love you and I want you to be happy with this outcome too. So like
Mhm.
your needs matter and my needs matter.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I know in the gentle parenting community, a lot about what we talk about is, hey, mom and dad, don't forget about your needs,
Mhm.
but in the more mainstream, sort of punitive power over, I really talk about, you really want to be on the same team as your child. There
Mhm.
are ways to find solutions where everybody can at least have their needs met, their
Mhm.
emotional needs met, if nothing else.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yes.
and I
Yes.
really want my daughter to come speak to me as a teenager and tell me what's going on and know that she'll have space to talk, that I'm not going to judge her, that I'm going to help her and listen to her and empathize with her. I don't want to shut her down. I don't want to shut her out.
Yes. Yes, because that's what happens when we create, using that power, we create all that resentment, and then it's us versus them.
It is, absolutely. I had this similar experience as you. I did not tell my parents anything, and I was sneaky and I lied, because I didn't feel like they were a space that I could talk to.
Mhm.
And that's hard, and I think most parents, when they really check in close to their heart, they want their kids to know that they can come to them if they're having a hard time.
Mhm. Yes, yes, and I'm wondering how many, the listener, I wonder if you are relating to that. Like, what was your own sense when you with your parents? Like,
Mhm.
see, sometimes it's hard to remember back, but what was it like when did you feel like you could go to your parents? Did you feel like they were on your team? And I think that's a really, like, deep and profound thing to remember, because we get so caught up in the nitty gritty. We get so caught up in just the day to day, getting to here and getting to there, that we forget the deeper intentions, like what do we really, really want for our kids?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So then when we think about this sort of approach of we're on the same team, and you have parents and they're in kind of very much an us versus them paradigm, and how do parents who are in an us versus them kind of paradigm, and they just want their kids to listen to them, which is like the biggest question I get from
Right.
everyone, is like, how do I get my kids to listen to me? And we're feeling a lot of pressure because we may be out with our kids, and they might be, acting in a way that's not so great. They're out in the grocery store, they're out in the playground, and you're, the, so parents are like, well, how do I start this shift?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the pressures, right, that we are on ourselves, that we put ourselves under, kind of imagining other people's judgment and etc. I don't know. I think there's a bunch of questions wrapped up in there, Amy. You can
I was like, oh, well, there is. Between our own internal pressures and the stories we have going on in our minds, and the pressures of society and the fears we have. Is my child going to be like this when they're an adult? No, because they're going to have more mature brains. um,
Yeah.
it's really hard. So I'll go back to the original part where you said people are always asking, how do I get my child to listen to me? And it's it's really like going back and remembering that we have to model the behavior ourselves. Are we listening to our kids?
Mm-hmm.
Are we modeling what it's like to stop and hear, to really stop, not to keep stirring the spaghetti or, working on your computer, but to like stop and take that minute to listen and look at them and do those things we want them to do, right? That we ask of them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me that you're listening? Can we show them
Mm-hmm.
that we're listening?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
so modeling it is really important because modeling teaches that skill. And then really knowing that unless we're nurturing that relationship, they're not going to want to listen to us because we're not building trust. And if we want our children to listen to us, we have to really nurture that relationship and build that trust. Now, this doesn't mean they're always going to listen to us, right? I mean, I'm a psychotherapist and I teach this to parents and I do this in my office, and I still have a 9-year-old child who doesn't always listen to me, because nobody always listens, right? I mean, I don't always listen to whoever I'm supposed to be listening to. Um, but the goal is, in those really intense moments when you have to go somewhere or you're having a hard time in the grocery store, do you know how to reconnect with your child so that they can stop screaming and yelling and running around? Do you have the relationship with them so that you can move in close and let them know that you're there and help them calm down so that they can listen to you and so that they want to listen to you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 I love what you said. Oh, I just lost it. Oh my gosh. But this idea of that they aren't always going to listen to you. And
Yeah,
I think that we want something that's going to work 100% of the time, right? Like that's just going
right.
to work, right? But like we're human. But then the other thing is that we have such high we have higher expectations for our children than we have for any other human being. And
Absolutely.
children are the most immature, by definition, human beings. Like we
Yes.
have this expectation that my child should listen to me the first time I say something. I shouldn't have to repeat. And like, how
Yes.
many would you ever think that of, like, say you had like a 20 something year old roommate living in your house? Like sometimes that the sort of, I have to like get in my mind, like, how would I talk to if this person was like a roommate living in my house? Like, what would
Yes.
my expectations be? But because they come from, for the large part, from our bodies, and we see ourselves in them, and we project so much in them. Like, her expectations are like that they are just going to be like it's just up here. It's so
It
high.
is.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous and it's unreachable.
It's unreachable. We forget that they're actually behaving exactly as they're supposed to be because their brains are learning about themselves and the world around them and their place in the world. And they can't do that unless they're moving and they're active and they're talking and they're crying and they're trying things. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so
Mm-hmm.
hard to remember, like, oh, wait a second, this is going on because she's a child. She's not 20 or 45, you know?
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, that was so hard for me because my daughter is really my oldest daughter is very precocious and very intelligent kid, and she just started speaking full on sentences. Like she is just like 2 years old, and she would talk to me the way I'm talking to you. Like it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
And then I would go to like I would, like so much so that I would go to another 2-year-old birthday party and I'd be like, why is this child kind of talking to me? Like, why can't they just have a conversation? Because I was used to this child who said forsythia and, all this like, and so it was interesting because that, that sort of helped me, triggered me to forget that she was a 2-year-old child, or
Yes.
she was, and we forget that we think, oh, they're so much more mature than they were.
Right.
They're now walking and talking. They can now understand my words. Now that they can understand, they are going to understand everything.
Yes. And they're going to be able to tell us or speak
Yes.
to us and use their words.
Yes.
I have a lot of parents who'll say, I know they can do this. Why don't they just do this? So tying their shoes. I know they can get dressed and and put their shoes on and tie their shoes. Why can't they just do it? And so then we go and we talk about, well, what's going on? They're on their way to school and they're worried about what this big day ahead of them, and they're worried about leaving you, and they just want you to connect with them. And sometimes they just want you to be there and help them tie their shoes. And they can't tell you in words because they've got all this stuff going on in their head. And all they can do is cry, or all they can do is say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
because while they have the language and the physical skills, they are emotionally overwhelmed with these young developing brains, and they just need us to move close and be present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And probably our lifestyles in general, like our world has sped up so much, and our kids' worlds have sped up a lot too,
Yes.
and that we have this expectation that, first of all, I think we have unrealistic expectations for ourselves that we can just go, 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 and just do. And we have crazy expectations for ourselves about how we're going to live and actually be satisfied human beings. And then, and then we kind of, that starts to overflow into our expectations for our child and their world. Like, yes, you can go to gymnastics and then to a swim class and then
Yeah.
and that's cool, it's interesting. And like we have to kind of take a step back and take this big picture of what is really going on and what our expectations. And you talked about, going back to what you said earlier about the fears that we have and stories in our mind. And I wonder if you would talk about that a little bit more, because I think this is really, we go into parenting our kids and we think, I just need to get them to listen to me. I need to fix them so that everything will be okay. And I think that there's a lot of much deeper awareness to have about what's really going on. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
I'll try.
Yeah. As best you can. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think so much of our parenting really can be driven by our fears if we're not at least trying to be aware of what's driving us. So maybe we're afraid that um, we're not good enough as a parent, or maybe we're afraid that we're not giving our children enough experiences and the best of everything. And they need to start, like you said, they need to be taking music and gymnastics and art and, and why do we have these ideas? I mean, one, we have a lot of information that says these things are so good for your kid's brain. Um, and so that fear is that we're not going to do enough, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
um, I'm not being a good enough parent. I'm not giving my child enough. I'm afraid that my child isn't going to be good enough themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
S-
and that idea, like you said, that we have to fix them. They're not
Mm.
born broken.
Mm-hmm.
They are just born with these immature brains and bodies that have their whole lifetimes to grow and develop, just like we are. At 20 and 30 and 40, we are constantly learning new things and
Mm-hmm.
um, understanding ourselves better in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they really deserve to have that same um, opportunity to be growing and changing across their lifespan, not in just those short 18 years that they're with us.
It seems like it's, we have a natural human tendency towards negativity. Like we have a negativity bias because
Mm-hmm.
of, evolution, survival, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it tends to lead us towards, I think there's so much anxiety in this day and age. I mean,
Oh,
that's something
yes.
I struggle with, of course, too, but it's something that I think that we just keep going,
Mm-hmm.
not acknowledging that is the underlying foundation, right? Is that there's some anxiety there, and that if we keep thinking, like, if I just do the next thing, if I just fix this thing, if I just get the right clothes, if I just make sure I'm the right level of fitness, if I
Mm-hmm.
just do this 5K or 10K or marathon, whatever it is,
Yeah.
then I will be good enough. And that's the same thing with our kids, right? That if they are this, if they are behaved, if they listen to me, if they this, if they that, then they will be good enough. And it really is this kind of like, we're in this continuum really close to this sort of fear level rather than this trust. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we, it's like, it's interesting. I mean, that's a big question in my mind that I think about, is like, how do we move towards trusting? I mean, that's the whole thing about parenting with influence and parenting with relationship and parenting without punishment, is that we have to trust that our kids will care about us enough to care
Mm-hmm.
about what we say, right? And it's
Right.
this kind of this moving towards trust. It's like I guess it's a long journey and it's very individual, but I don't know.
It's really hard to trust, especially for those of us who weren't raised in, for those of us who were raised with harsher punishments, um, or just a lot of punishments. It's hard to trust that this can happen without using those parenting methods
Yeah.
because we don't even know what that looks like or feels like.
Yeah, yeah. So you were raised in a more authoritarian household, and you decided you didn't want that, sounds like.
Yeah, this is kind of like my big rebellion. You know what I mean?
Your whole career.
I've based my career on my rebel self that says, you know what, this is not what I want for my child and my family.
Mm,
What I want,
I hear you.
yeah. And it can be a real balance then between sort of appreciating my own child's rebel self,
Mm.
and recognizing that um, she's not being rebellious, right? So she said to me the other day, Mom, sometimes you have to rebel against mom, even if she's the best mom. So she was
Oh,
like, because she had done something, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but she had done something without asking. Not that she has to ask for everything, but it was like one of those, like getting
yeah.
on the iPad or something before bed. So she says, sometimes you have to rebel against mom, even if she's the best mom. And what she was saying is, like, sometimes you just have to make a decision and do something, and someone might not like it, but sometimes you just got to do it. And I can appreciate that because I'm the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most of us, sometimes you just have to do something and try it and see it. And I don't want her to be filled with all this fear that we've been talking about. I don't want her to have this negativity bias where she looks at everything and says, the worst is going to come of this.
Mm-hmm.
I want her to go, you know what? I trust my mom to be able to handle this decision that I make, and I will deal with the outcomes, whatever they may be. Of course, I didn't punish her. I just went, oh, okay, yeah, thanks for letting me know. Let's put that away and go read a book so that we can like go on with our evening.
Yeah.
But you know, our side that says this isn't working for me, it's worth hearing. Those are those emotions that come up. Our fears, can we look at them and say, oh, this is what's driving me. Let me get some clarity about this.
Mm-hmm.
Or I really don't like that my parents did this to me, so I'm going to do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But then to look really closely, like, am I being reactionary or am I responding in a way that is going to be helpful for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Can we embrace our rebel sides without like thinking that they're bad, whether they're in ourselves or our children? Like, why are they rebelling? What do they need, or what are they trying to learn, or do?
Mm-hmm.
Why won't my kid stop crying in Target? You know, I know she really wants this. You know, what can we do? How can I meet her needs and not be afraid of all the stares
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
people?
Yeah, and just to clarify for the listener, when Amy says how can we meet our needs, it doesn't necessarily mean buying whatever the thing. It means
No,
like what are those
promotional.
emotional needs? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because people think, oh, well, she needs this. Well, no, actually we stay on the level of solutions too much, right? Like this is
Yeah.
a child's solution to whatever her need is, and there's
Right.
a different thing.
It is. Thank you. It's so true. We don't have to fix it. They can be upset and we can accept their upset. And that's part again of that sitting in that discomfort. You know,
Mhm,
our child is upset. That doesn't make her a bad kid or me a bad mom.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
just an emotion and it's worth hearing and having.
And for those, for so then we have the continuum. So we're talking a lot to the parents who maybe are in that sort of us versus them paradigm, and there's some reassurance like, no, actually sometimes it's helpful to say like, actually, I don't punish my kids, and they're actually, we have a great relationship and they're very
Yeah.
cooperative. It's pretty
Yes,
interesting, like
that's true.
I have to mention that, by the way.
By the way, my child isn't always a rebel, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
she is super cooperative and lovely.
But then for those who are on the other side of the pit, because people think like, if I'm not authoritarian, then I'm permissive.
Right.
And then I'm being nice to them. And being nice to them is giving them what they want or whatever. But actually, that studies have shown that children of permissive parents feel like they are uncared for. They are not loved because the parents don't set any boundaries. And part of the idea of setting boundaries is looking at this idea of meeting our own needs, right? And you talk, modeling, it's like, yeah, I mean, to be able to understand our own internal fears, our internal story, to be able to have the wherewithal to be able to be present in those difficult moments, like, we can't do any of that if our own needs aren't met.
No,
None of it.
absolutely.
None of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's hard to sometimes think, like, step back from that situation and say, okay, I'm having like this body sensation, this pit in my stomach, and I just want to scream. What's going on? And
Mhm.
getting really curious. And then my kid clearly is having a similar sensation because she's over there screaming,
Mhm.
and then like, okay, like really stepping back and getting curious and then working with your kid to figure out what can we do to resolve this. And it's not about, like you said, it's not about getting that toy or letting them have the fifth scoop of ice cream. It's about having room for everybody to feel what they feel.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
seeing if there's some solution that satisfies everybody. And there's not always,
Mhm.
but I think more often than not, there is some sort of solution for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. If we get to sort of underneath to that layer of needs rather than the layer of solutions, right? Like,
Yeah,
what is
right.
it? What do you actually need? What is the need here that is calling for this? And I think that when we think about this idea of doing all this sort of work of understanding ourselves and being able to step back and being able to step into a place of discomfort, I think that it's important to mention that this is almost impossible to do if we have an internal dialogue of shaming and blaming and
Mm.
and be using that harshness with ourselves. Without some level of self-compassion, of understanding in ourselves, like, this is really hard, this is really triggering, like, it's not easy for me right now, it's not easy for so many people in this situation right now, and there's many people who have the same feelings, and just kind of having that level of internal dialogue to be able to cultivate the presence of mind to just not curl up in a ball, and because parenting will do that to you, it'll do
It
that.
will. It will absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think without cultivating that self-compassion, that, parenting is taxing emotionally and physically sometimes. I mean, it's also really lovely and fun sometimes, but if we can't cultivate that self-compassion for ourselves, we certainly are going to struggle to give compassion, like true, authentic compassion to our children and to other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think we have given the listener hopefully a bunch of food for thought today. Bunch of food for thought, and it's really kind of this is, I feel like that Amy, you and I and so many others, I feel like this is a shift. This is like a real shift that's happening. Um, and I want to just thank you for your contributions, your many contributions to this shift and to this conversation. Is just, I mean, this big conversation. It's really, you have such a clear, present, compassionate voice. And I really want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Hunter, for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yes, yes. And before we go though, Amy, tell people where they can find out more about you and your work. And
Sure. So my website is parentingbeyondpunishment.com. I have online coaching services and some self-care, mindful self-care group for moms. And then if you're in Atlanta, I'm Wild Child Counseling, and you can find me at wildchildcounseling.com. So we have support groups for parents, online and locally, and I would love to see y'all in those groups. We have some lovely people in there.
awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. So appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast today. I love what Amy says, and I love her presence and her point of view. She makes going into this collaborative approach just makes so much sense the way Amy says it. I love it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hunter@hunterclarkefields.com. That's Clark with an E, Fields with an S, all run together. And this episode will be up at mindfulmamapodcast.com, mindfulmamapodcast.com. You can find show notes and things like that. And I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast so you get it every week, and leave a rating. That always helps spread the word in the iTunes algorithm and things like that. But actually, even more than leaving a rating, the best thing you can do is share the podcast with your friends. Actually, that's easy to do on your phone, just so you know. And leaving a rating is easy to do on your phone. On the phone, if you click on a certain podcast, or you have a podcast up, it has the little three dots on the right-hand side. You click on those three dots, and you can has a whole bunch of options that pop up, and share episode pops up. You can do that. You can I like to text message episodes to people, email or Twitter or Facebook. So you can do all those things, which is really cool. And then also on your podcast app on your phone, you just click on the search bar right at the bottom right. And even if you're already subscribed, you search for the Mindful Mama podcast. And then when you find it, you go ahead and just click on reviews. So you search for it, you find it's a little blue box, you see my picture, you click on that, and you click on that middle box says reviews, and you can click right there to write a review. So that's a great way to support the podcast. So please do that. And then Mindful Parenting is opening for registration. Yay! It's registration is opening on the 13th. It's closing on the 20th, so you have a window to jump into the live course. And you get so much more than just this course. There's so many bonuses, but you also get to join the course for life, which is amazing. It's really can be very life-changing. So I hope you do that, and I hope that we can connect in person every week. It'll be exciting to do that starting real soon. So that's exciting. And I think that's it. Coming up in the next episode, we have an interview with an incredible woman about highly sensitive kids. So I now know that I'm a highly sensitive person, and I know I have a highly sensitive kid. So I'm wondering if you're wondering if you have a highly sensitive kid. So you might listen to the next episode with Melissa Schwartz and you can find out. So I will see you then. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to my hubby, William Fields, for the music. Go check out his stuff at williamfields.com. And have a great week, my friend. Fill your cup, okay? Honor yourself. Love yourself. Practice to do that, okay? Because you're worth it. Okay, have a great week. Namaste. Are you frustrated with parenting? Do you want to practice conscious, compassionate parenting, but you don't know how? It's not easy, and there's no roadmap for this. Until now. I'm Hunter Clarke-FIELDS, creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I know how frustrating it is because I've been there. I really struggled as a young mom, and when I found myself yelling and triggered by my child, I knew there had to be a better way, and there is. Mindful parenting is really different from other parenting trainings. They don't tell you that all of their good advice is as good as useless when our internal stress response is triggered. Mindful parenting teaches you research-based tools and practices to reduce your stress response so that you can respond rather than react. And it teaches you exactly what to say so that you can create willing cooperation from your child. You can learn more and enroll at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and you can join us for a free live training from October 9th through 13th, where you'll learn why your kids don't listen to you, what punishment really teaches, the parenting truth that every pediatrician gets wrong, and the powerful hidden myth that can undermine your parenting. Sign up now at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. I'll see you there.